So my Facebook friends are just a little bit late, but that's okay. And good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. Where I am, it's 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on October the 12th, full moon 2019. I'm Elizabeth Windsor Craig, and this is History Reset, brought to you each Saturday by People's Internet Radio, whom I and others sponsor to bring valuable information to the public that corporate hierarchies refuse to divulge. This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio to keep the people's truth coming at you every week. Tonight's History Reset show is about stupefaction and how we are deceived into thinking as and like the cabal wants us to, we are led into our thinking. P.T. Barnum had a saying: you can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And that is a real truth that we are confronting right now with yeah.
There's a question in there before you get going too quickly.
Why? Can it wait?
Oh.
I'm just getting rolling. I'll get to it in about 10 minutes. Okay.
All right.
The divisions only last so long, and then people just simply wear out from the conflict of it. Okay. Now we know as children, we get told there's a Santa Claus, and then the gifts show up. Okay. We're told there's an Easter bunny, and then the Easter eggs show up. Okay, so we're told an affirmation or a story, and then the outcome agrees with the story we are told. The problem arises when we get to religion, because when does the Messiah ever show up? This is the question and the problem. The other part of the problem is we get used to these affirmations and wishes that never get satisfied, and we begin to think that that's what's appropriate here in physicality, in third density, materiality, where everything is dominated and manipulated by time. Okay. We get up in the morning and we go through a bunch of activities, then we go to bed at night. Okay. We eat at the same regular times of the day. We do the same things over in response to time. And quite often there's a watch or a clock that is directing our efforts and activities. But when the purpose of the activity is not being served and the outcome isn't what we wanted, then we have to question the activity itself. I notice on the moon book's almost ready, that most of the human figures I see are black with turbans. Most of the people there are black. And I ask myself, why would that be? And probably because of the black people I know and have known, they take orders and they don't question them. Whereas we white people tend to question everything and drive everybody crazy. All right. We hear other things too in terms of politics and history. We all know that Christopher Columbus was not a nice man. Any of us who have lived over 20 years. And yet the legend and the fable and the story goes on that he discovered the west of the North America, and he's, started settling it and all that. None of this is true. And so we're conditioned to accept affirmations and stories and fables that are not true, that do not lead to a good outcome. And the outcome of this is disastrous because so many people no longer even expect to hear what's true. They don't even expect it. You know, I get an email in my email box and they say, here's the one nutrient that's gonna halt your high blood pressure or this or that heart attack or Alzheimer's or whatever. And so you click on it and you're looking for the word. You're scrolling down and looking for the word. What are they talking about? And 10 screens later, they give you a box to put your credit card number in, but they still haven't told you what they're talking about. Okay, this is the kind of affirmative nonsense that we are subject to all the time, and that we have to entrain our progeny somehow, if we can, to see through. We have to be able to read between the lines, because the affirmations and the facts and the fables and the wishes all get mixed up. That's where we are. Now, one affirmation that we have is that the moon is a dead place. And it was a viable affirmation when the leadership of our world said to themselves, and I'm not talking about the physical leaders, I'm talking about the, you know, over our heads, the Godhead, the galaxy. They said, well, if they're more or less isolated, if those people are more or less isolated from all these others coming in at them, maybe they'll devise their own problem-solving processes and their own conflict and dispute resolution processes, and then we can introduce the extraterrestrial life to them. All right, that was the theory. Okay, but it didn't happen that way. And so the affirmation that said, or the wish, or the fable that says there's nobody on the moon, not having produced any good outcome, it is no longer true at all, and it has become a lie that needs to be brought to the attention of the public mind. We can't just leave fables in place and give them a holy and sacred and glorious place when they don't go any, not only do they not go anywhere, but they fly in the face of reality. Okay, there's a big reality show over spinning ball Earth, flat pizza Earth, concave Earth, inner Earth, and the geologists and cosmologists who are charged with the job and the task of knowing what's true aren't saying a word. They're not saying a word. Now, for our children not to know what kind of a piece of land we're walking around on, that doesn't serve any useful purpose. All right? Doesn't serve a useful purpose. So now I can answer that question that somebody had. Where is it? Steve, where's the question? Hello? What happened? Okay, I guess we'll just wait. It'll come up later. All right, so that's where we are with the lies. Now, in politics, we have been told that the United States is a republic. We've been told the United States is a democracy. We've been told we're under common law. We've been told we're under maritime admiralty statutes, and we're under treaties. Okay. We're also under United Nations Agenda 21 administrative codes that we had no input into. So what are we responsible for? And how do we get there? Who's going to tell us that we can believe about where we're at and where we're going? This is not an easy thing to look at. So we have to look at the laws of causes and effects and see, looking at ideologies, which point of view leads to the outcome that we want to see in the world. Never mind getting personal. Let's just get abstract. Whose point of view makes sense to you without regard to the politics of it? Well, I grew up in the Jewish culture, but I noticed that what wasn't going on was saying what they do and doing what they say. There was a discontinuity between what was said and what happened. So that culture didn't earn credibility with me. And then I joined Christianity because of the Beatitudes, the attitudes to be, that appeared to me to actually work and get good outcomes. And I have found that that is true. If your yes means yes and your no means no, and you do what you say and you say what you do, and you do unto others what you want to have done to you, and if you pay attention to the little things as well as the big things, your life takes on a sense of sanity, a sense of things being in order. And if you keep your mind in an orderly fashion so that you allow yourself to think what you want yourself to think in order to stay with who you are, then things kind of work out normally. All right. And so usually in your family, you can find somebody who's on the same track as you. And I haven't found, well, we're at different age levels, but I haven't found somebody in any of those families who is on the same track as I am. And I've had to get used to the idea that, yes, I'm kind of odd. All right, I'll accept it. You know, it's not easy being green. You grow up being looked at, you know, how's it go? Because green is like so many ordinary things, and people pass you over because you're not standing out in the water like sparkles in the water or stars in the sky. Okay, that's being odd. All right. And so you have to figure out with what ideology you want to identify that has created outcomes for people that you like to see. All right. And I tried a number of them. And then you adopt their way of thinking because you adopt their thoughts. Now, the metaphysics of all this is quite complicated. I mentioned a few minutes ago that here we are in third density, third dimension, physicality. We're subject to time. And so we have this reality down here, building things brick by brick and putting money in the bank or spending it penny by penny and dollar by dollar. But the culture that conquered this world 450,000 years ago because they needed gold miners, the Anunnaki, are configured a little differently because they're immortal. They're built to be immortal. They do not need to die. They can die, just like Jesus Christ was able to die when they killed him. But if he hadn't died, he would have just lived on and lived on as the Anunnaki do. All right. So time is a different factor and feature for them. They live in an eternal now in which things happen before them, but they're not regulated by what happens. They're regulated by the clock of the stars in the sky. And that's why they adopted astrology and the precession of the equinoxes as their timepiece. Am I making sense? All right. So they have a completely different sense of time. And they speak from affirmations because the way they move their lives is they manifest out of their visualizations and out of their thought groups and their unity what they want to see, not individual by individual as much as group by group. So you see, when they speak an affirmation, which is also a wish and a hope and a prayer, okay, they're speaking an affirmation. This is a visualization that we're working on now. Okay, we're working on manifesting peace. We're working on manifesting a cleaned up world. Okay, the behaviors are different and the words are different. And that's why the talk coming out of the UN to an ordinary on the ground practical person sounds so strange because they're up here all the time. They're head tripping. That's why we say they're head tripping. Okay. Because in fifth dimension, when you have an eternal body and you're not worried about what the clock is doing, that's what you do, is you visualize what you intend to manifest out of your physical consciousness. Well, this is where things get confusing here in third density, because we have fifth density conscious people here. We have ninth density conscious people here. We have 19th density conscious people here. And those people up there are talking about manifesting out of their consciousness. And so it catches for the people who are down here on the ground, building brick by brick and living cause by effect. And our language has confused the two levels, using the same words for both levels. And they're very different levels. Okay. Manifesting prosperity is through a networking of contacts in which you are attractive to the people who can forward you in your progress. Thriving is a matter of physicality, taking control of this vehicle so that you can control the immediate resources you have and the immediate skills you have and the immediate communication skills you have to build a future job by job. See how different that is? Right? Now, the way third density people can thrive in this 5th through 19th density quagmire is to get real physical. Get real physical. When you do that, you keep your head down, you stay out of harm's way. Right? And you do it by attending to your habits. You know, habits are holy. They make us or they break us. Okay. And life in balance is very good. But peace cannot be manifest or achieved by aggression and covert operations, but by aligning peacekeepers. Now, what does this mean? When leadership is using their position of sovereignty to bully and rob other people, that's a misuse of sovereign leadership. So what can we do? We can, down here on the ground, act to void and abort the leaders who are evil. How do we do that? We align those of us who want to actively abort those who are evil and press for a confrontation of issues. Now, this is going to get interesting because both the right and the left is wanting to abort leadership, this leadership or that leadership. But I don't know if you noticed that in the confrontation of issues, the one side does not want to deal with the issues. They only want to deal with the power. They only want to deal with the rule baiting. They only want to deal with the influence they can buy. They are not operating from the truth of the causes and effects in the matter. And so one side has a heavy burden they're not going to be able to overcome. And that burden is they are not telling the truth to their people about the circumstances and the process of solving problems that we as nations and as a Western civilization have already adopted. We adopted in 1066 and in 1776 a set of operating principles and methods in which there are certain rights to every human being. But the other side have adopted a set of maritime admiralty administrative codes and UCC codes which provide them with pragmatic tactics and gambits for undoing the ancient laws of Hammurabi and Moses and the 1669 Bill of Rights in England. You see, the left is tearing down the structural methods that have been devised over centuries to govern in a civil and open and transparent manner. All right. The left have utilized the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which is double dealing 1A, the Frankfurt School, which is Karl Marx plus double dealing 1A, the Kalergi plan, like the United Nations plan, which is pure, unelected, unrepresentative, unconsented to rule baiting, okay? And then there's Sharia, which makes a claim to come from a holy, godly source, but teaches taqiyya, jizya, jihad, and forms of domination over other cultures and over women and little girls, in which those other populations have no rights at all. All right. So there are two sides to this coin. One is to remain with methods and principles of civil behavior and rule of law, and the other on the left is to overturn rule of law and instead adopt, legislate, and require and insist on a set of rules that are arbitrary according to the preferences of the ideologues, okay, in globalism, Zionism, Islamism, and Illuminism. Illuminism comes from the Luciferian rebellion that said there's no such thing as a sacrosanct method. So it's between civil methods and non-civil methods that we have to choose what we want our children and grandchildren and their children, if we even want to have a future in physical reality, because if you don't have any children, you have no way to come back. That's metaphysically true, right? That is the choice that we have to make, and in the presence of so much fiction, so much scandal, it's a real challenge to know how to get there from here, all right? Insofar as personal life before we can take care of others, we have to take care of ourselves. And so I sat down a couple days ago and wrote out a little download on what we can do, how we can cope with just ourselves so that we'll be in a condition to help somebody else. And I hope this little set of guidelines will be well met by you. Okay. You see, health is not achieved by preventatives, but by our close attention to breeding and longevity. Now, the breeding was done before we were born, all right? But in longevity, we're trying to learn how to last our bodies because our physicality is temporary in time. And we're here to learn lessons that we will take with us when we go. While we are here, we hope to live with a measure of dignity. But dignity is not achieved by domination, but by self-control, wit, and patience. And here is where the whole problem and story of narcissism comes in. Okay? It's about a false dignity when the affirmation that an individual has adopted is not true in fact and in reality and in causes and effects. They've adopted a reality that's either out of this world because it's so arcane or it's inappropriate in its outcomes, right? And so if we can focus on, and I really enjoy Jordan Peterson's monologues and his sweet melancholy. He knows suffering, you know. He knows suffering, and he incites us to self-control, wit, and patience, and to taking care of ourselves. And I find that that's very, very useful for me. As far as getting along with the younger generation, this is the primary obstacle to communication at this time between the generations, is the fact that the younger generation does not have the vocabulary to even understand what we, the older generation, know how to speak. We deal with two different language sets. And so the younger generation is very impatient and they don't understand and they go, don't bother me, you know? But what we look at and find in the schools is that the schools have bought into the left-hand path of propaganda. And the schools are not teaching skills. They're not teaching vocabulary. They're not teaching the practical aspects of getting along in third-dimensional physical life. In other words, kids don't understand what they're reading because they don't have a vocabulary, but they will recite cultural Marxism to you. Kids can't make change, and they can't figure, but they learn alphabraic factoring, but never mind problem factoring, okay? Kids have a way of talking that's very concrete and feeling oriented, and that's good. But the cosmic wisdom that we had to learn a half a century ago is not included in their studies, nor is it included in the church. The church is supposed to be teaching the basic commandments of God as they are edited and amended and appended by the Beatitudes of Jesus, okay? And the laws, the Mosaic law, is not present in any Christian church I've ever walked into. They've never directed me to read the law. They've never directed any of the children. I taught Sunday school for a while in a Quaker meeting, and the laws of Moses never even came up. They just have 10 abstract commandments and they let it go. They don't even know what lawful means, okay? And so what our children need to learn is what's basically fundamentally lawful, and that's very, very simple. And it's in the commandments of God, and I'll give you a link down below if you haven't seen the summary of the commandments of God. And it's basically common law, right? It's basically common law. It's not a big deal. It's not difficult. Law is quite obvious physically. Now, in third dimensional physicality, when an issue comes up, somebody sues somebody else and we go to court and each one testifies about their behavior and what their behavior caused to happen, and they compare outcomes and decide how to repair the damage and restore the people to law-abiding methods. That's what justice is about. But that isn't what happens in the rule-baiting domain of treaties and maritime admiralty law. In that case, every jurisdiction has its own preferences, and in the current administration of law in the United States, judges can be bribed, and they are. And now that Social Security is supposed to take care of old age, elders get to spend their retirement isolated, alienated, and set aside because the children think, well, there's nothing they need. They have their Social Security, they have their security, we can just live our lives. Now, this is not a complaint, really. It's a statement of experience that I see all around me. And it doesn't defeat me because I know God and He knows me and He has taken care of me, okay? And He comforts me. But the best thing is He gives me ideas that I can run with and succeed at. Even at my age, He's got me wound up wanting to do things, all right? I have a hard time going to church because the churches are fragmented as the public mind is. I go on Patheos, I respond to the Patheos site on Facebook. And they say some of the most incredibly blasphemous and insolent and insulting things. And you can't get into that mode, okay? So I skip over that and I can contribute where I can contribute a principle that God has shown me is true. And that's the only way I can contribute. I'm not going to jump in to the dogfight. I don't have a dog in the fight over doctrines. Now, I'm working on the Moon Book. And my hope for it is that it is going to embarrass the people in what has become a covenant whose affirmations about where we are in the universe no longer have any validity because they didn't produce the outcome they were intended to produce. The belief or the claim that the moon is a dead sphere is now simply a lie. And not only do they, it's not just that they are propagating this false mythology. It's that they make incredibly good money doing that, okay? Engineers who work at NASA make big bucks. And little old grandma here looking at their images and looking at their xerographic digital principles of operation doesn't make a nickel, all right? So it's time for them to smell the coffee and realize that their affirmation that isolating humanity from the rest of the universe hasn't worked out. And it's time to obsolete that traditional fable and get on with returning to a vision of solving problems, testimony by testimony and brick by brick and nail by nail. Because until we do that, there will be no alignment of the peacemakers and the peacekeepers who can speak a common language about third dimensional problem solving on a world where there are lots of problems. And the people who talk about the problems and the deceit and treachery and deception of how the problems occurred and existed, those people are disappeared and often suicided and heart attacked. Okay. We have a very bad situation with respect to no dignity for whistleblowers, no dignity for problem solvers or mediators or facilitators or conciliators, no dignity for the professions of solving human social problems. And the people with power belong to the Luciferian faction that says, we're the best, we're the prime people, we're the preferred people, we're the people of God, and God says that we are to rule over the inferior people. Okay, it's time for that bullshit to get put away too. All right. All right. These liars cash their paychecks every week, but we teach our children not to lie. And so we teach our children to be content with being cheated and lied to because we do it. We teach our children to respect their teachers in school, but their teachers lie to them by teaching them useless theories, fables, and propaganda. You know, I never did use the Pythagorean theorem, and I only used algebra, and I had 2 years of algebra, a year of trig, and a year of logic. I only used algebra once in 45 years of working. So I don't think 2 years of it was a particularly good idea. We teach our children to adore and follow public and religious practices of dividing and hating other people over their beliefs and over their knowledge. You know, if they believe in the flat earth and you don't believe in the flat earth, then they're despicable people. It doesn't matter their behavior. It doesn't matter how kind they are. It doesn't matter how charitable they are. It doesn't matter how polite they are. If they have the wrong belief, they're out of your circle, you see. We employ the church's teaching that doctrines and dogmas are all that matters, you know. There are churches that I enjoy going to because I have a metaphysical theology that's familiar to them and theirs is familiar with me. But what they tell me is I cannot be a full member there unless I go back to square one, get rebaptized as if my baptism had never had any hold on me, and adopt their whole set of dogmas, doctrines, and practices. I can't do that. I can't do that. Never mind that Jesus Christ only talked about effects of human behavior. He never spoke to ecclesiastical dogma, okay? And his only reference to the leadership of his country or nation or state where he lived was when he said, "Render therefore unto Caesar what is Caesar, but unto God what is God." That was his total statement about government propaganda. Okay. So then we wonder why going to church, our children treat us with such disdain, because they understand the difference between an affirmation and a fable. They got it because they have to deal with gaming all the time. They know the difference between a game and real life. Their predicament is they don't have the words in real life to operate real life the way they can operate a game. All right. So on YouTube, narcissism, I could never say that right, is a huge draw with huge audiences. And what's happening is that we're finding out that anybody with a firm position on any topic or issue has to be crazy. They're a conspiracy theorist if they believe that we are lied to. We're deluded if we don't see the difference between the facts and the affirmations, or if we do see the difference. Okay. So when ETs are finally allowed to land and be met hospitably, they indeed are going to pity us all. Okay, I got rid of that. So there we are about dealing with the lies and the deception and the treachery, is we have to be able to have a consciousness that's larger than the domain we're looking at. Because if you look at one domain or another, you get involved in, yes, this reminds me of a conversation I had with Don Myers yesterday. He has a tremendous patriotic fervor. And he was telling me all the things that were going wrong in all the domains and places that he knew about. And I said, Don, all of that stuff is just experiences. They're just experiences. Now step back and look at what is leading all of those experiences. Okay. We have these two hostile ideologies: representative democratic civil governance versus influence and resource monopoly and top-down domination. These two ideologies are going at each other. Okay. And so who are the leaders that are promoting our part of this conflict? The representative, democratic, covenantal, consensual form of governance in which rule of law is what works, and if it's not working, we fix the problems. Okay. Who are our leaders? And he had to admit, right now, the only leaders who are acting to stem the human trafficking and the bribery and the blackmail and the vice of the left, who have adopted disruptive strategies, are the nationalist leaders. Trump being one, okay, and Le Pen and Assad and Putin and some leaders from the Far East I'm not aware of. Okay, it's the nationalists right now, with some minor help from weak monarchies, that are standing against the New World Order, which is the amalgamation of all of the ideologies, all the isms, the communism, socialism, Islamism, globalism, Zionism, fascism, Okay. And he couldn't tell me. He couldn't tell me who the leaders were. And I said, Don, you are friends in the military mind. You have friends in the military mind. They need to go back to what they learned at West Point and realize that the President of the United States, in his attempts to bring the United States back to full sovereign nation status, that the military needs to back up the president. Would you please tell your military friends to get off their asses and go help the man? And he liked that. He liked that. And I hope that that's exactly what he will do. And I prompt and prod President Trump when I can on Twitter. Never get an answer, of course, but that seems to be the place where he hangs out. And of course, his comments are outrageous, and they're intended to be outrageous, okay? He doesn't deal as a negotiator on the same level with the same kind of terminology as he does in Twitter. They're two completely different functions. You negotiate one way, you set up a deal in another way. I have this book, How to Make a Deal. I've never gotten through it. But anyway, there's a set of protocols for setting up a deal. There's a set of protocols for negotiating a terrorist situation or a conflict between sovereign nations. There's a protocol for Twitter, and they're not the same. They're not the same. And anybody who expects the president to talk on Twitter the same way he talks in negotiations or on the telephone just isn't playing with a full deck. Either that or they're very naive about how things are done in a civil, responsible, dignified way. That's what we want, isn't it? That we can be a civil, responsible, dignified culture, even if we have all kinds of people here. And of course, what that means is our laws have to apply to everyone, the same laws to everyone, and everyone has to have the same common vocabulary of social terms. And that's basically what I'm here for, and what I try to do is speak to the problem that younger generations do not know how to share experience with older generations, and negotiating through issues, negotiating through problems is already difficult, even in our own families. And this is how the Frankfurt School and the protocols of the learned elders of Zion and the tactics of Saul Alinsky and the double dealing of the two-faced eagle and the Jesuit order has disrupted the continuity of generations and the continuity of bloodlines, which is so important for maintaining a civil, natural society. The left wants to get into transhumanism and profligate sexuality and human trafficking and body parts marketing, and they already have drug running and gun running. They already have all that. And for those of us who have adopted an ethic of harmless lawful behavior and productive and positive attitudes, all of that vice and all of that crime is not what we want in our faces and in our environment. Now, here I am in my 70s. I'm in no position to help the police deal with the people who are ignorant of the law, the people who are so frustrated they're out of control. I can't help them. What I can do is come here and talk like an old grandma and try to, seek reason, try to see if anybody wants to share this with me. Oops, what do we have? churches and religion know about practice magic. That is a generalization that simply isn't true. Churches are so ignorant metaphysically, and they are so stuck on their regular dogma that you can't even bring up what metaphysics is constituted of, let alone magic. Magic is strictly for the Satanists who are trying to garner more personal influence. The shape and design of most churches and cathedrals were designed and have been renovated and reused as churches, but they were originally designed as electrical generating stations by the Tartarians. Okay, that's what they were originally for. So our problem of not knowing our actual history is part of the same problem of not knowing where we are in the universe, not knowing who our neighbors are in the universe, not knowing the conformation of the ground that we are standing on. And yes, we are an ignorant people indeed. Okay, I guess that's the question or statement that our friends wanted us to deal with. All right. At this point, the international stage appears to be at an impasse. All the negotiations are going on behind curtains and over our heads. And what we can do is take care of ourselves. And so I have a list. Yeah, I get these downloaded lists, okay? Habits are holy. They make us or break us. First of all, if we focus on our awareness, we become aware of how we have adopted and bought our circumstances, okay? Because every little thing that happens to us is something that we allowed because we made a prior decision. If we focus on the feelings that are coming at you and not just on the words, remember I said you got to learn to read in between the lines. You'll be able to speak, you'll be able to return a comment that's not at the point of conflict, but you'll be able to speak to the norms and standards over that point so that your listener, the person you're talking to and listening to, is not automatically offended even more. Okay, so when they're angry and you listen to the feelings and let the content set you up to how that conflict or how that matter is dealt with in terms of a standard or a norm, you'll disarm your combatant friend. All right. If you live by sharing yourself, you will choose your commitments carefully because you know, and I know, we have limits to our internal and personal resources. So try not to bite off more than you can chew. Of course, it's hard for me to say that. That's all I've ever done. All right. If we make a commitment to be fair to everybody and not just to those of us that we deem as our peers, we will practice clarifying every statement coming and going out of respect for the dignity of the person. You know, there's a saying, may the spirit of you, my spirit acknowledges the spirit in you. You know how that goes? So if we're going to be fair with all, we're going to clarify and not modify with adding anger. Okay. If we share our wisdom, whatever level we are, okay, yes, we're making affirmations about what we hope is true. That's our personal wisdom. Okay, this is where the irony comes. Make sure that we have a confident handle on it and that we're not just reciting somebody's dogma. You know, again, I go back to all the narcissism comments on YouTube, clearly are about who's politically correct enough according to someone else's preferences or not. Okay, that's what narcissism is a fight about. Okay, if you practice regularly habits that clear your mind, okay, for me it's walking 3 times a day. I have to walk my dog. While I'm walking, I'm using it as an exercise in posture and an exercise in breathing, and I'm keeping my mind open for thoughts that I can use somewhere else. If I have these habits that clear my mind, what you will notice, and this is really important, is not just what you have found to be true, but you'll also go the next step and you'll notice the effects that that truth has. If you have these regular gifts and regular habits of raising your own consciousness so you're not dealing in the thick of the battle, don't let your dog be in everybody's fight. You'll be keeping your head down. You'll be keeping your head. And maybe you'll get some good things done for all of us. Yes, we want to be what we want to see coming at us in the world. So that is my pontificating for the day on avoiding being deceived and avoiding being befuddled. And as P.T. Barnum said, you can deceive all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't deceive all the people all the time. We don't want to be among the deceived. And this has been Emily Craig. Steve, are you ready to do your break?
Sure.
Okay, well, I'm all done, sweetheart. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Oh, wait a minute, you're all done, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
There we go. We're all done. See ya.